on the nose, y'all. I can't remember. I can't believe that I used to do this at noon in the middle of the day. Funny how things change. I don't know. One day I just did it in the evening, and I said, "Wow, look at that! So many more people hang out with me in the evening. All of us are working so hard. Thank you." And then now, I mean, I guess it's even more of a sacrifice because you're taking time away from your private time to spend time with me. I really appreciate you. Thank you for your huge participation tonight. And I think that one of the things I want us to think about is, what does Aretha Franklin have in common with Tupac Shakur? You know, things you would never think of. What what does she also have in common with Jimi Hendrix? Jimi Hendrix died in 1970 with an estate worth $175 million. No will. Bob Marley died in 1981 at 36. $30 million estate. No will. Barry White, 2003, at 58. I met Barry White. I have a picture somewhere of me and Barry White. My mother, listen to Barry White every day. When I met him, I don't know, he really didn't really take it as a compliment. I was like, my mother loves you. Sign this picture. God, she was only 58. From a stroke, $20 million estate, no will. My man, Marvin Gaye, died in 1984. It seems like yesterday. Goodness. And you know, Marvin really caught off guard, shot by his father. $5 million? Wow, I would have thought it would have been a lot bigger. $5 million estate, died with no will. Prince, did I mention $300 million accidental overdose? Gosh, how many years ago? 2 years ago now. I can't believe it's been 2 years. 2016, at 57, $300 million, no will. The one thing I must say though about Prince, he had a whole bunch. You can say that he had no will, but he did have a lot of trust, as I've heard, that he did have trust set up. You know, when he had no kids, you know, it's really sad when it's like, you know, people that have kids, especially minor kids, and they don't have a legacy plan. No, will is cool, you know, to use that name, but the bottom line is, it's the first principle of AfroEconomics is to think about why you're doing what you're doing. You know, what is your legacy plan? What is the footprint that you want to leave on the planet? So your will is basically like your instruction that you want to say what you want to be done. So this report I found a report from CNBC. This is the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, who reportedly had no will or trust. It is the latest instance of an entertainment giant neglecting financial matters until it's too late. Wow, that's the opening line. Neglecting financial matters until it's too late. That hurts. So I want us to definitely, I want me to make sure that, look, it's always good to have a backup with, I love it that I have that handy dandy AfroEconomics with JB Bryan Facebook Live as a backup to make sure, because sometimes I get so excited, which I did, and I forget to record this for you all. And so I probably will download that so that you will have it on the YouTube channel as well, so that you can share it. But make sure you go. We have like 7,000, almost 7,000 people on the AfroEconomics with JB Bryan on Facebook, and I try to periodically during my work day give updates. Like we've been having some extreme historical highs, longest rallies ever, and just have some brief discussions throughout the day of what's going on in the marketplace. So make sure you go and you like so that you get notifications of when I go live from the office or from meetings or from anywhere onto the AfroEconomics with JB Bryan Facebook page. Yeah, I'm not I'm not like the president. I do use Twitter, but I'm not like tweeting all the time. But I am a Facebookie. So so to get about you are like me because you are listening to this right now. You're all about the wealth development. So check out the AfroEconomics with JB Bryan Facebook page. So when we think about, and let's be mindful of our future and of what we want to happen with our money upon our death. And when I said like I know why or find out why Aretha Franklin left no will and no trust. See, I was giving you a list of people who left no will, but you can work around a will. And I tell my clients that all the time, that the contracts that they have with me supersede what they write on the will. Like you could have on the will that I'm leaving everything, to my sweetheart, this woman you just met 2 weeks ago, and you're leaving everything to her. But in order to actually leave like your IRA, your brokerage account, and these other things to your new sweetheart, it would have to be on those contracts that you have, the IRAs and annuities and the life insurance policies, the beneficiaries. Those are contracts, and they supersede what you said on that will. So you definitely need to realize that if for some reason Aretha Franklin has all of her monies, the bulk of her money, in an annuity, say, that has a contract, then to leave each of her sons $20 million of her $80 million, then they're good. It really doesn't matter, because the will would only take care of, but how do you leave the royalties from all my music? I'm listening to the music, and more of her music is being sold probably now than ever before, and more people want to grab onto her CDs, and they're downloading her things onto their playlist. How do you get the royalties, the royalty money from the record labels to go now to your estate if you haven't set up that instruction in the will that says all of my royalties are split across my 4 sons, or all of my royalties go to my niece who has gone to the court to say that she wants to be the contact for the estate, the executor, that she wants to be appointed by the courts to take care of the distribution. And her sons have said that they are people of interest for the estate. But if the will was done correctly, or a trust was established correctly, or the contracts on the accounts were done correctly, then that anything that would have to go through the courts would be a minimal amount. It might be your furniture or your jewelry or things that, but she might have over the last, she knew that she was passing away, so she may have started gifting off things from her estate over the last 20 years. If that was true, though, they wouldn't be able to say that she's worth the $80 million, because she would have already distributed that, and it wouldn't be included in her estate. How they're determining the $80 million, we do not know. But the bottom line is that a lot of your financial instruction it can be done by the contracts that you have with your financial advisor. And that's why it's important to always have your beneficiary forms updated. Always have those. Have everything exactly the way you want it. I could tell you about horror stories where people have remarried and still have their old spouse on their life insurance policies, and that they have not updated things in situations where they are terminally ill. And so we need to realize that a lot of times someone said that they can't hear. Oh, I'm so sorry you can't hear. I hope you can hear now. And then but know that the overwhelming bulk of your assets for most people can be passed on through contracts or through having their name on the deed. Like, say you have a real estate property and you own it together. Well, you pass and it has with rights of survivorship on it. So then you can easily pass it on to the other person because you set it up that way initially on the deed for it to go to them automatically as a survivor. But it could be just joint, and there are ways that if you set it up as joint, like joint in tenants or joint in common. I'm not a lawyer. Let me use that disclaimer. So you have to be, but when you set up joint things, you have to be very careful and know, is it joint where we're just in common so that if something happens to you, it goes to your family and to your family separately, or with survivorship, it automatically changes over to the other person that you own it with jointly if you have it set up with joint with survivorship. But on each of the documents, like on a brokerage account, you can have transfer upon death. On your brokerage account, that's a retirement account, you have the beneficiary forms listed. So a lot of the things, that's why it's very important for me to continue to encourage you to stay on top of your game. And I talk about these things quite often with clients. And I have unfortunately run into too many people that, thank God, because of membership creates more discussion because we're focusing on planning, not on buying products. I just thank God for the membership and the idea to set up membership. Look at this water. Woo! Thank God for water. And right before I started talking, I asked my daughter, bring me a glass of water. Thank God I got that. But the membership allows us to really talk through things, and say, oh, well, do you have your will updated? And a will doesn't have to be very complicated or expensive, but it has to be written out and your signature has to be witnessed, and you have to say what you want to be done. So I had a client brought in something that she had purchased, and it was it just had like a fill in the blank will, and then it required the witness. That's a very good start because the bulk of her assets were already set up to be transferred through contracts. So what she just had to have on there are these things in her home, miscellaneous items, and how she wanted them to be directed, and who she wanted to be the executor of how these things would be handled. So, but the interesting situation that I found is that I had a family member that left me as the executor of their estate, but they didn't let me know about it. So by the time I got involved with it, it was after the funeral, and all of his instructions were not followed. And the surviving family members made sure that I did not know about it until after they did everything that he asked not to be done. And there wasn't enough because he was ill. And if he had told me, I could have looked out for him. during his illness a little bit better and had a better, and at least known that you're not doing what he asked. And he had set up joint accounts, and I don't know if those joint accounts were set up because he was sick, and if they had always been joint and they had been taken over. It is. So know that just because you have a will does not mean that things will actually be followed, unfortunately. But the will is to instruct how you want your burial to be paid for. Because in a life insurance policy, you cannot say, this is to pay for my burial. So in an estate, through the counties or the cities, they will say that the first thing that has to be paid for out of the estate is to take care of final expenses in the burial, and the services for the funeral have to be taken care of first. But that if it doesn't go through that until after you're already buried, someone has to sue someone to get that done. And that's generally not going to happen, because who wants to spend all that money on a lawyer when somebody's already spent all your money? This is really sad. But so what I love is that we have to realize that we need to be careful about who we are putting as the executor, and make sure that you allow them to help you. Let them know that you put them there. You must let them know that they are there so they can take care of you. So how everything was handled would be interesting to know for Aretha, on how things were done for Miss Franklin. Like, how did they know exactly what she wanted if you didn't leave a will? Like, what church you wanted to be, where you wanted. So it was all just kind of based on, I guess, someone who maybe she had a joint account with, and they had enough money in there to pay for the burial service. Because really, if everything was in her name at the time of death, just her name, it would have to be a freeze on it. And she's public, so the banks would have to close it down, and everything would have to be frozen until after the estate and who's in charge of the estate was handled. I guess it could be like a IOU to the funeral home, because we all know, and none of us have any money. So theoretically, we can imagine that probably somebody was, she had some account together, or they had the ability to do it. Because even if you didn't have a will, it's probably unlikely that she had a power of attorney. So the power of attorney actually ends upon death. So a person can have a power of attorney while you're alive, but the executor of the estate upon death takes over. They could be the same person, but if you don't have a will, they can't be. It can't be the same person. It didn't say, maybe she had a power of attorney, but they were frozen at death. I hope I'm making sense to you. So, I really hope that you're understanding that it's very important for you to have that letter of instruction, and we call it a will. But don't be fooled by the idea that because this happened and she didn't have a will, that everybody can approach you now and say, that's why you need to do this will and a trust, and incur thousands of dollars of unnecessary expenses, when you know that I just told you your assets are handled through a contract. That if it's, when real estate, it can get a little bit more complicated on how, if you don't want to put the person on the deed. So a trust will help you when you want to give money to a charity upon death, or control how the charity receives the money, or control how your children receive the money, because the will just says they get this. The trust goes on and on. It's an entity that exists, that lives longer than you, because it's a legal entity. If you have a business and you want it to be passed on and to continue to live beyond you, then you could control those types of things through utilizing legal things like a trust. But for most cases, many of you you are buying and falling for this push that everyone needs to have a trust, when for many people it's totally irrelevant. And many people are getting the trust and they don't understand that what it's saying, that if you have a will and it says to turn all my assets over to the trust, then you might have an absolute stranger controlling your family's ability to take care of your remains. And they'll be taking fees out of it, because the trust, in many cases, the administrator of the trust is being paid based on the size of your assets before anything else gets done. So so that is why it's important to involve your financial advisor into your entire estate plan, so that when we approach and we need legal documents and you want to use a legal professional to help you prepare these legal documents, you're coming fully equipped with a background that the basics of, I've got this covered through beneficiary forms, this, and this, and this, and this. These are the only assets that are outside of that. So why would I? But if you're, have $50 million, then we might need to have some instructions on that. Or you have this large life insurance policy that you want to make sure it's used for a particular purpose for decades after your life, then we may need to have some other legal moves that come about. And that's where the trust will come in. But I'm going to tell you, these superstars with this $300 million and Miss Franklin with an $80 million estate, it would help our Black wealth for generations to come if they would just take their assets seriously. I think that certain experiences in a professional's life must cause this to happen. And instead of getting past it and making a full out effort to find a professional that you trust, people give up. People give up. And a lot of financial matters are based on trust. I've noticed that people will almost go to anybody for nutrition or medical help or school or anything, but when it comes to their money, they're much more private, much more guarded, much more particular. My industry is much more regulated, than many industries that are much more sensitive. That it's amazing to me. But that just shows you that our Black wealth matters. It matters for generations to come what you do or you don't do. So do you need a will? I would say overwhelmingly, we all need to have a legal document that represents how we want our final assets to be distributed. So it would start with minimum of making sure you have your beneficiary forms all updated, having a power of attorney, a medical directive of what happens if you become ill, a power of attorney for what happens if you become incapacitated, and then having that will of what happens, especially if you have minor children that are involved. You want to have instructions. You want to have those instructions. And trust help a lot with minors. If you're a wealthy person, you have minor children, and you want to make sure how the money is distributed to the children prior to them having to wait until they're 18, right? And then indeed, Mr. Tice said Prince died without a will. And yes, indeed he did. I mentioned that. I mentioned a whole lot of people that have that in common. And I will reiterate, that Aretha Franklin had no will or trust, according to the records. Now, I hope that this will come out and this will be proven totally false. But it is true. Prince had no will, but I heard that he had a whole lot of trust. That he set that up. That Prince was very private, where a will is a public document. People can go in and find out what you had on your will and who it went to and contact the people who are getting money and everything. But a trust, no, it is extremely private. You set up a trust account. We can set up trust investment accounts. Nobody can come to me and say, who's the trust? Who was the executor, who the administrator for that trust? Nobody can do that. Tupac Shakur passed away at 25. It's a little bit more understandable. No, but if he had been in AfroEconomics at any age, I would have been talking to him about that first principle of AfroEconomics, legacy planning. It's real. He had $40 million at 25. Those people around him did not take him seriously, obviously, because I can't see. I mean, how do you have all these people on your staff taking your money, getting paid, financial professionals I know were in his life and not make sure that he had instructions? That's sad. Jimi Hendrix, 27, 175 million. His estate was larger than Tupac's at the age of 27. Both of them doing for $175 million. Suspected drug overdose, no will. Bob Marley, 36, $30 million, no will. And he had a lot of children. Definitely. Barry White, no will. Marvin Gaye, no will. I mean, we got to think about this. I mean, I even heard like that John Wayne died with no will. They said his estate was caught up like 5 years. A lot of times just between legal things, if you don't have a lot of money, the lawyers end up taking almost all of it. It's sad. Billie Holiday died with no will. Age 44, she was worth $1 million. Probably by the time it was finished, it was like not that much left. Sad. My girl, Billie Holiday. But but definitely make sure that we, when we have our quarterly meetings, that we talk about it. I know that I'm make a point. I'll make a point for us to talk about it. It's the first part of the workbook. I'm trying to incorporate the workbooks into our meetings. We have our Dr. Williams said he's becoming a lawyer. You probably should. Yes, you should. Yes, indeed. We need lawyers just like you, and you'll be AfroEconomics member, and we'll be breaking it down. Yes, indeed. So but definitely we need to update all our beneficiary forms. We need to look at that first section of the workbook and the book. Members, that you have it absolutely free in the downloads. So make sure that you take advantage of, just, and basically it's a checklist of, the bottom line is, do you have your documents in order? How do you want things to be handled? LegalZoom, I think, is a great opportunity for us. Save a lot of money on the documents, and that's a lot more than a whole bunch of rich people that I just talked about had. So don't be mad at LegalZoom. Like, don't be mad at just getting a template offline. Getting your witnesses, registering it with the county or city where you live is legit. Do it. So, but you gotta realize what's handled by beneficiary forms. It's because most people think that everything they have is handled by the will. I don't care how much you list your accounts that have a transfer on death or pay upon death on them on your will. It doesn't matter. They're going to the person that is on that account. That account with the paid upon death or beneficiary doesn't even go through the probate process in the courts. Doesn't even go through the estate at all. Boom, it goes right to the beneficiary. Done deal. That's what, so we have to talk about what's the will for, what's left out in the will, why, like, say you're single and Your deed, if you had a spouse and you both had your deed on your house together, that's easy. You and your spouse went around and bought a whole bunch of rental properties and stuff together, and a deed, and you're both on all the deeds. That's easy. You're not. You got some properties with your cousin and your uncle and your this and that. That gets complicated. So we need to talk through those things and talk about how you have the ownership set up. How, because sometimes you think you know what's going to happen upon your death, and you find out that legally that's not what's going to happen upon your death. Buying properties where people set it up with joints with rights of survivorship, thinking that that's going to go to your family, when the survivorship says no, it's going to the person you bought the property with, who could be just somebody you just bought the property with, but you don't want them to get your assets. You want your portion of that ownership to go to your family. Well, we need instructions for that. And you need to make sure that you have the ownership set up correctly, in the correct way. Yes, and yes, and yes, it is very important. Thank you all so much for sharing your evening with me. I want to make sure that we did. So what happens? We talked about what happens when you don't have a will, and what a probate court is. A probate court will not enforce your last will unless the following criteria are met. You have a sound mind. So like it's saying that the courts will reject your will, and someone could argue against it if they can argue that you had already lost your mind. So like, say, you're on your deathbed and you do this will because this person and the nurse talks you in. That's the way they see it. And you might want the nurse to get everything that you have. But if you did it and you were on your deathbed and you said, I want all this to go to my nurse, you got to know that your cousin Louis could argue against that he didn't know what he was talking about. He did not want this nurse that he just met. He wanted me, cousin Louis, to get this money because he loved me and he was my friend. And see this picture, we're friends for the last 100 years. So if they can prove that you weren't of sound mind when you do the will, it's not going to be valid. It has to be proven that you did it on your own free will, and it has to be signed in front of witnesses. So for some reason, I just saw that, and it must be important for someone out there to definitely know. Here's a question. I am single. Can I do a deed on death for property like a house? Exactly. You are single, Miss Lady, and that's why you need to have a will. So that the will and the instructions will basically be your deed on death, that this property goes to this person upon my death. And you might, if you don't want to put the person on there before, if you put the person on there as joint owner before, joint with rights or survivorship before, shoot, you could. They don't even have to go through probate at all. But if you don't want to give up and share it with them before death, then and some people just give up their property while they're still living. So I'm so glad that they've made it so that you can, in order, because some people would do it like they'll feel like they won't qualify for certain medical coverages and things like that. Well, now your primary residence does not count against you for qualifying for medical support and whatever Social Security things that you might be trying to get to help you pay for long-term care expenses or getting a nursing home or something like that. And people will be like, take the house out of your name because, but the primary resident is not supposed to count against you. So, we can look at that and look into that deeper. But I researched that one time for a client because they were like saying, I need to do this legal document because I need to get it out of my name and this and this and that. And I was like, wait a minute, look at this, I said, that doesn't count against you if it's your primary residence. Now, if you have these rental properties and all these other assets, well, yeah, they do count They do count because it's extra assets that you should use to take care of yourself. That's how they see it. So the a deed on death is basically what a will is. That's the purpose behind a will, to create that the ownership for this will transfer over to this person upon my death. And you could use trust for those type of things too as well. You could say this property will transfer over to the trust, for some particular reason why you might want it to be in a trust that will hold it for 20 years for some particular reason or something, but the trust will allow you to have a lot more control beyond your death. You just won't know about it, but but you can't set that up while you're living. But the will say that it will have a fixed decision that upon my death, this becomes this person's property. And then they will be able to get their own deed on the house. But a lot of times people do that and they leave their house to someone and it still has a payment on it. You might want to leave them a policy that pays off the payment also, because many people are going to already have a place to live. And if they can't afford, that the new payment, they have to sell it anyway. So, that's one more argument of why we don't need to have debt, right? We want to make sure we get rid of debt as quickly as we can, hopefully before we pass. Indeed. Well, thank you, Ms. Sherman. I enjoyed this talk too. Thank you so much. I hope that helps, Cynthia. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to hit the road, Jack. But remember, RESPECT, respect yourself and respect all the generations that come after you. Let's make sure we have a plan, right? Love yourself. Thank you. Thank you. Thank God for all of you. Have a wonderful week. I'll be looking for you. Probably won't do Sunday because y'all going to be cooking out. And I don't like it when you don't show me love. So I may not do that. But don't count me out. You never know. So I'm going to see if y'all email me, jb@afroeconomics.com, and email me, say, please do it Sunday. I'm not having a cookout. Please. My daughter's going to be like, please, let's have a cookout. So thank you. But if I don't get into your mindset on Sunday, I will be on your mind on Monday. Look, Labor Day, we're going to make me work. I'm going to make that money work. Have a good one. Enjoy your week. And members only meeting Friday morning at 9. Be empowered. God bless y'all.